Early roster projections for the New York Rangers. Can, will, and should we try to get all three kids into the top six for the Rangers? Plus, looking at where the Rangers rank as far as their players when it comes to fantasy hockey. We're going to take a look at the top 250 list from NHL.com. Also going to point the draft spotlight at sixth-rounder Dylan Roobroeck. All this and much more on today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 872 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So wanted to kick off today's episode, as I mentioned, with roster projections. We're going to take an early look at what I think the team could end up looking like as far as opening night is concerned, specifically the forwards. Going to try to figure out who we want playing with who. And this is more going to be what my personal preferences as opposed to what I believe the Rangers will end up doing, although it's possible that the Rangers could line up in a somewhat similar way as far as, the line combinations that I'm about to lay out here. But, one thing that I kept in mind while doing this, and again, it's a very early look. We're going to do this again at some point in the offseason. At least one more time, we'll project the opening night roster. We'll take a look at where things stand during training camp after a couple of the preseason games. Maybe even right before opening night, we'll do another round of this. Right now, it's an early look. But one thing that I've noticed, and one thing that was kind of a theme here as far as me putting together these line combinations, is that Peter Laviolette likes to have guys earn their minutes. And on one hand, every coach does that, at least to a certain degree, and on some levels that should almost be common sense. But I do think that with Laviolette, more than other players, he does kind of have, or more than other coaches, kind of has that reputation of he doesn't really care if it's the fourth line, the top line, whatever it might be. If you're playing well, you're going out there and you're grinding hard on your shifts and you're earning more ice minutes, then he will reward you with more ice minutes. And by the same token, if you're slacking a little bit, you might end up glued to the bench for a good chunk of the third period or whatever the situation might be, wherever they might be at that point in the game. But I will say, one other thing that I want to do here was to sort of spread the wealth a little bit. I think in recent seasons, we've seen some Ranger teams where the line combinations, the depth chart, if you will, has been a little bit top heavy. I think a great example of that was this past season. It really felt like the early parts of last year, at least the first quarter of the season or so, when the Rangers were struggling to such a degree, it felt at times like there were only a couple of players that could score for the Rangers. You're basically talking about Kreider, Mika, Panarin, Fox, and Trocheck. It felt like if the Rangers did not get offense from at least a couple of those five players on any given night, that they just weren't going to be able to score goals. And part of the problem, and it's been a theme for the Rangers over the past couple of seasons, and it certainly was very apparent at the start of last season as well. Again, the fact that the lineup is a little bit top heavy. So I went with some line combinations here that I think are going to put people in as much of a position to succeed as possible. And also, like I said, spread the wealth, quote unquote, as far as, being able to roll with three lines that can all produce offense and, do some damage and maybe even split ice time evenly. But with all that said, we're going to start with a top line, left to right. We saw a little bit of this line last year. It didn't really last that long, but we did see for a time last year, left to right, top line, Alexis Lafreniere, Mika Zibanejad, Kakko. This accomplishes a couple of different things. For starters, we are getting, and I know a lot of Ranger fans are going to want this, they want to see the kids get more prominent roles. They want to see them on the power play, in the top six, all that good stuff. We are kicking things off here by getting the two most prominent of the three kids. Nothing against Filip, but he was drafted in the 20s. Lafreniere and Kakko were drafted 1 and 2. So obviously those are the two that you really need to get going. And obviously we saw Filip come into his own a little bit last season. But lining up like this gets two of the three kids on the top line. It gives them a chance to take advantage of playing with Mika Zibanejad. And as far as Mika goes, it feels like you could almost put any two wingers in the NHL out there, and he's still going to thrive, and he's still going to do what he does and play just good all-around hockey. I know some people get on Mika Zibanejad because a lot of his points come on the power play, but he's just a good all-around center. To me, still one of the better centers in the league. And I think if you put him out there with Lafreniere and Kakko, that obviously bodes well for the two of them as far as taking that next step is concerned, because Mika Zibanejad, again, kind of a chameleon. He can adjust to any situation, and he can play with any two wingers that you put out there with him. I also believe that, for starters, let's start with Lafreniere and Kakko here. the two of them, along with Filip, I know there's a lot of Ranger fans that like the kid line together, doesn't think it should ever be broken up no matter what. I think at times it's okay to break them up, but we've seen Lafreniere and Kakko and Chytil. It seems like the three of them tend to be at their best when they're playing together. So we'll at least keep Lafreniere and Kakko together. And Lafreniere and Mika, we haven't seen them play with each other a ton since Alexis Lafreniere made his NHL debut, but we've seen enough to know that Lafreniere and Mika do have some good chemistry out there. They just have a feel for each other. They seem to kind of know where the other one's going to be, and we've seen some nice passing between the two of them in the past. So I want to roll with this as the top line for all the reasons that I just said. We move things along to the second line. We're going to go left to right. We're going to go Panarin, Chytil, and Wheeler. You hope that Wheeler, even at the age of 37, he's 36 right now, but he's going to be 37 before the season starts. He's still able, even getting into his late 30s here, to use his size and his strength to his advantage, as he has done throughout pretty much his entire career. If he can get behind the net, get some of those pucks loose, extend some offensive zone possessions for the New York Rangers, that's going to be key for this line, because if Wheeler is able to do that, do a little bit of the dirty work, then I think there's a good chance that he's going to be setting up Chytil and Panarin for some really good scoring opportunities. Filip has an excellent shot. We saw him take advantage of that this past season. Panarin's a little bit more of a pass-first guy, but obviously, if Wheeler's in there going to work and getting the puck loose and getting it to Panarin, hopefully he'll take advantage of that with a couple of shots. And I'm always somebody that wants Panarin to shoot the puck a little bit more, but he, along with several other Rangers on this team, as we've talked about in the past, selfless to a fault. So overall, I just like this line, and it kind of reminds me, Wheeler does, of when the Rangers had Jesper Fast on the second line with Panarin. Panarin's best season with the Rangers, I would say, was probably his first. I mean, he's been an excellent player throughout, but that was his best season. And who was on his right wing then? Somebody that seems, or at least at the time, seemed miscast as a top six guy. That was Jesper Fast going in, doing some of the dirty work. I'm hopeful that Blake Wheeler, different kind of a player than Fast. They're not exactly twins or anything like that when you look at build and just where they are in their NHL careers and things that they've accomplished so far. But overall, there are some similarities there. We saw Panarin benefit from playing with Jesper Fast. I think we can see him playing or benefit from playing with Blake Wheeler as well. And when you've got Filip out there, I was thinking about putting Trocheck here, but we're going to go with Chytil. Chytil's got a great shot, and he's got two excellent passers, perhaps setting him up for that shot. And Blake Wheeler, again, somebody that can do some of the dirty work. So I do like this as a second line to start the season. Third line, we're going to go left to right, Kreider, Trocheck, Goodrow. And this is where we see the benefits. This is where we really see the benefits of what I talked about just a couple of minutes ago, quote unquote, spreading the wealth. We now have a third line once again of Kreider and Trocheck, two guys that mostly play in the top six for the Rangers this past season, mostly have played top six for the majority of their career. And then you've also got Barclay Goodrow, who I see as more of a bottom sixer, but somebody that can play the top six when the occasion calls for it. Show me a third line in the NHL that's significantly better than this. I think you'd have to look for a long time. And again, you've got guys that overall could certainly be playing in the top six if the occasion called for it. Kreider and Trocheck took them a little while, and they weren't together for the entirety of this past season, but after they got, some opportunities to play together, I think the two of them started to gel a little bit, started to get a feel for where the other one was going to be. We saw them score some goals and some really nice rushes into the zone. You've got good speed on this line as well between Kreider and Trocheck. Goodrow, not so much, but, Goodrow, we saw him play with Mika and Panarin last season, and it never really felt like he was out of place, never really felt like he was slowing them down or anything like that. And on top of that, you've got Barclay Goodrow as somebody that can do a little bit of the dirty work for this line as well. So this is an intriguing combination here. And for anybody worried about Kreider, not getting enough time if he's going to be on the third line, I hear you. But keep in mind, Kreider's going to play on the power play. He's probably still going to play on the PK. He'll get his minutes. And like I said, the reason that I'm spreading the wealth this way is I think, first of all, the Rangers can afford to do that. And on top of that, you can get fairly even time on the ice distribution to all three of your top three lines. And beyond that, the players will settle it. Whichever line is doing the best job, I think you're going to see that line rewarded by Laviolette and the Ranger coaching staff. And then that brings us to the fourth line. I'm going Vesey, Bonino, and Pitlick. Vesey, not the flashiest signing this past offseason. He was on a PTO, signed the extension after playing well with the Rangers, has kind of reinvented himself as a very pesky defense-first forward for this team, and that's what you want from your fourth liner. Bonino, very hardworking player, well-respected player as well, two-time Stanley Cup champion, just a veteran who knows what he's doing out there. Tyler Pitlick, he'll give you some peskiness as well, has got some speed. You don't see too much speed on a fourth line just doesn't happen all that often. It's just not the style of player that you usually see out there. But Pitlick at least gives you a little bit of that. I think he'll fit in well. And so there you go. That's the 4 line combinations as far as the forwards are concerned that I'm looking for the Rangers to roll with on opening night. And like I said, we'll keep track of everything, training camp, the preseason. Eventually, we'll do this at least one more time in the offseason before the regular season starts. We'll kind of revamp this, and I'll kind of do a version where it's not necessarily what I want. It's what I think the Rangers are probably going to do heading into the regular season. So we'll have that to look forward to. And as far as a 13th forward on the roster, you got to figure, they'll have at least one of their forward they'll be carrying. I'm thinking maybe either Alex Belzile or Johnny Brodzinski. I don't know that it would be Will Cooley or Brennan Othman. I get the feeling they both start with the Hartford Wolfpack. Once you have Cooley or Othman on your NHL roster, you want to roll with those guys. You don't want them watching from the press box every night or every other night. Once they get there, you want to let them, hit the ground running and, give them a chance to entrench themselves in the lineup. And that's why I think it'll be, a veteran kind of NHL, AHL swingman, like either a Belzile or a Brodzinski, but we'll look to see what the Rangers do. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to talk some fantasy hockey here. I know a lot of you guys are excited about the upcoming fantasy season, and I happened to come upon a article on NHL.com where it ranks everybody, and we'll see where the Rangers ranked and just kind of have some general thoughts about the fantasy hockey scene, particularly the players on the New York Rangers. We're going to do all that fun stuff in just a second. But first, got to let everybody know, today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your swing at betting on MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $2,000 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we just want to go ahead. Thank everybody, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And for the everydayers looking to do a crossover special with Locked On Blackhawks, going to ask him about Patrick Kane, Eric Gustafsson, and just some general hockey stuff as well. We're also going to continue talking about the Ranger free agent class. There's a couple guys left, as well as the Ranger draft class. But for right now, let's go ahead, turn our attention. Going to have some fun here with some fantasy hockey talk. So I figured we could start this whole thing off. Once again, there was an article on NHL.com that listed the top 250 ranked fantasy hockey players in the league for this upcoming season. Obviously, they're taking, kind of an early look at things here. I figured we could do the same thing. I know that a lot of people play in the Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League. And interestingly, I was just talking the other day about ESPN needing to reactivate the Fantasy League. Just a couple of days later, they have indeed done just that. So if you played last year, I believe you can sign back up, and you should be getting an invitation from me. And all you have to do is sign back up. I will save your spot for a while. After a while, though, we will, for people that don't return this upcoming season, they will be replaced by people that are looking to play for the first time. If you did not play last year, go ahead and send me an email or a DM on Twitter. Let me know of your interest, and I'll save your space in line. So definitely looking forward to that. It'll be our 4th year of Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy Hockey. Always a good time. But for right now, though, like I said, let's go ahead. I was just really curious to see where players were ranked and where the Rangers were ranked. And, was Igor the top goalie? Was Adam Fox the top defenseman, et cetera, et cetera? So I figure I'll kick off this whole section by just reading the top 20 here per this article on AHL.com. So you get Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, David Pastrnak, Nathan MacKinnon, Matthew Tkachuk, Nikita Kucherov, Jason Robertson, Mikko Rantanen, Jack Hughes, Austin Matthews is number 10. Then you go Kirill Kaprizov, Tage Thompson, Brady Tkachuk, Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Cale Makar, Mitch Marner, Igor Shesterkin, there's our guy, Ilya Sorokin, and Elias Pettersson. And actually, Adam Fox is number 21. So a lot to unpack here. I don't have any real issues with the rankings here. Everything seems pretty accurate to me. I do look, though, at guys like, Ovechkin and Crosby. They're 14th and 15th overall, respectively. And maybe there's part of me that's just kind of still stuck in 2013 and just still thinks they're among the absolute best. I mean, they're up there pretty high even now. But I don't know. I feel like I might be more tempted to go with one of those players over somebody like, say, Jason Robertson or a Tage Thompson or a Mikko Rantanen, guys that are not quite as proven as Ovechkin and Crosby. Ovechkin and Crosby, they're almost like floor plays at this point where you're going to get big-time points, maybe just not astronomical points like you used to get from them. But that was kind of my first observation here. The other thing I noticed, of course, is that Igor Shesterkin is not only the first Ranger on this list, he is also the first goalie, the highest-ranked goalie on this list at number 18. And to kind of just run through the goalies here, you've got Ilya Sorokin right after Igor at number 19. Andrei Vasilevsky, couple picks after that, number 22. Linus Ullmark, who obviously had a breakthrough season for the Bruins last year. He is at number 24. You got Jake Ottinger at number 28. And then our old buddy, the number 6 ranked goalie coming into the season will be Alex Georgiev. He is at number 38. And then after that, it's quite a drop. There's not another goalie until number 73 with Connor Hellebuck, which to me, that's way too low for Connor Hellebuck. He should be ranked quite a bit higher than that. And if he gets traded, probably even more so, because he'll probably be on a better team than the Jets if he does indeed get dealt. But yeah, that was interesting to me. It was cool to see Igor Shesterkin obviously top the list as far as goalies are concerned. The other thing that you'll notice is that Adam Fox is the number 2 ranked NHL defenseman. He's at number 21. Cale Makar is at number 16. I know there's a lot of back and forth between the two fan bases as far as which defenseman is better, but those are the 2 top-ranked goalies. You've got Rasmus Dahlin at number 33, Erik Karlsson at number 35. Karlsson will get you killed in the plus-minus stat if he stays with the Sharks. If he goes somewhere else, I think his value definitely increases, so something to keep an eye on there. And then I figured we could kind of conclude this section by just seeing where all the Rangers rank, in the top 250 here, how many Rangers crack the top 250. So we already know about Igor Shesterkin at number 18. We know about Adam Fox at number 21. Adam Fox is somebody that if he's still there in round 1, getting toward the end of round 1 in a 20-team league, which is what we do on Locked On New York Rangers, I'm definitely going to be looking to take him. Although, what are the odds of that? We've got an entire league of Ranger fans. The Rangers tend to really fly out the boards when we're drafting against each other, and I'm sure that'll be the case again this season. But then you've actually got Mika Zibanejad at number 26, Artemi Panarin at number 30, which surprised me a little bit that Mika was ranked a little bit higher than Panarin. I mean, I guess you could kind of go either way there, but it wasn't too long ago. I mean, probably as recently as 2 off seasons ago, where Panarin was comfortably in the top 5. For him to be all the way down at number 30, that's pretty surprising to me. This is somebody that's going to flirt with 100 points every season. And I mean, you've got guys, I know that, it's apples and oranges with goalies and skaters, but you've got Jake Ottinger ranked ahead of Artemi Panarin. You got Rupi Hintz ranked ahead of Artemi Panarin. Linus Ullmark, who was outstanding last year, but before last season was just kind of a run-of-the-mill goalie. You've got Elias Pettersson at number 20 with Panarin at number 30. So I'm probably Ranger biased, just like a lot of you guys would be as well. But I would have Panarin ranked quite a bit higher than this. I think 30 is way too low for Artemi Panarin. And I realize that maybe this has something to do with it too. Panarin, he scuffled a little bit in the playoffs last year. Maybe that's kind of the lasting image that people have of him, not just Ranger fans, but general hockey fans. But however you feel about how Panarin did in the playoffs last year, and obviously he was not good, and he'll be the first one to tell you that, has nothing to do with fantasy hockey and, how he's going to produce for your fantasy team if you indeed do draft him. So to me, that was a little bit too low for Artemi Panarin. But the Rangers, 4 players in the top 30 overall. That's not too shabby at all. I know it's fantasy hockey. It's not the real world, but I still think that's pretty impressive. You scroll down quite a bit. You got to drop down quite a while to find the next New York Ranger. Artemi Panarin was at number 30. We've got Chris Kreider at number 72. And that sounds about right, I would say. Kreider, we've talked about this too. For as consistent he is, as inconsistent as he can be, his numbers always end up about the same. The one kind of exception to that rule was 2 years ago when he scored the 52 goals. I'd probably get Kreider a little bit earlier than this as well. I mean, this is for somebody that scored 52 goals 2 years ago and then last year was right around 40, somewhere in that ballpark. I think Kreider should be ranked quite a bit higher than this as well. We've got to drop down to find the next Ranger. Vladimir Tarasenko is still listed as a New York Ranger because obviously he hasn't signed with anybody. He's at number 112. Tough to gauge. I mean, I think it depends on where he ends up signing, which team he's with. I guess never say never as far as him coming back to the Rangers, but you'd have to trade a couple of contracts. You have to get Tarasenko to take a discount. It really looks unlikely at this point. Never say never, but very unlikely that Tarasenko will be back with the Rangers. We drop down another 3 points, and we find Vincent Trocheck at 115. Trocheck could be a little bit of a steal if he ends up with some more puck luck this upcoming season. He hit the post about as much or more than any player in hockey this past year. And obviously, a little bit more puck luck, a little more of those pucks going to the net, and you're looking at a much better season for Vincent Trocheck. And like a lot of players on this list, it's going to depend how the Rangers deploy said player. Is Trocheck still going to be on the top power play unit with all those superstar players around him? Is he still going to be on the second line with Artemi Panarin? That's something to keep an eye on. And I think, both those things would factor in as far as what Trocheck's fantasy value is going to be for this upcoming season. We go from Trocheck at 115 to Blake Wheeler at 133. Same thing. I think Blake Wheeler, just like pretty much any other player in the NHL, any player that's ever played with the Rangers since Panarin has been here, if he's on the Panarin line, he'll get the Panarin bump just like anybody else does. And if that's the case, he has a chance to certainly beat his current projected draft status as number 133 overall. But if he's kind of down the lineup a little bit on the third line, and maybe not a part of the top power play unit, or maybe even not on the power play at all, I think he'll be on one or the other. But those things will obviously factor in as far as, affecting his trade value. Or his fantasy value. We've got K'Andre Miller at number 156 overall. Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I think, K'Andre Miller is somebody with some upside, somebody that could look to take a couple of steps forward this upcoming season. But I've got no issue with him being placed right around there on the, the fantasy depth chart, the fantasy ranking here. I think that certainly if he's out there with Adam Fox, that bodes well for his points improving, but I think he probably ends up starting the season with Jacob Trouba. Here's an interesting situation. Filip is so good that he's on this list twice. For some reason, the author of this article has Filip at number 188. They also have Filip at number 191. And just to kind of, give you guys some closure here, Filip is number 188. Then you've got Mason McTavish at 189, and you've got Connor Brown at 190, and then Filip there he is again at 191. I guess we'll consider him number 188 overall. Again, it depends on usage, and it depends on if he's on that Panarin line. If you have Filip centering the Panarin line, as I mentioned that I would like a little bit earlier in today's episode, then, man, Filip has the chance to return a lot of value if you're getting him at number 188 overall. He'll probably go a little bit earlier than that, once again, given that, it's a fantasy hockey league full of Ranger fans, and so he'll be off the board pretty quick. Then the only other Ranger listed on here is Alexis Lafreniere at number 235 overall. Kakko not listed. That's pretty crazy. I might be inclined to draft Kakko before Alexis Lafreniere. I get the feeling that if one of them is on the top line and not the other, you could be looking at a situation where Kakko's out there with Mika and Kreider on the top line, and that would bode well for him as well. But yeah, Lafreniere and Kakko, we're waiting for them to take that giant leap forward. And, if you take a flyer on one of them late in the draft, then obviously you'd be hoping for that as well. The only other Ranger listed here is Patrick Kane. He's under a category that says other key injuries. Obviously, he's not going to be ready for the start of the season. Might not even sign with a team at the start of the season. So we'll keep our eye on that. But this is fun. It was cool to just kind of look at the lay of the land as far as fantasy is concerned, and specifically the Ranger players. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Want to conclude today's episode by talking a little bit about Dylan Roobroeck, 18-year-old center from the Oshawa Generals of the OHL. And we will do that in just a second. All right, so Dylan Roobroeck, once again, 18-year-old center from the Oshawa Generals of the OHL, 6'7", 205 pounds. Kid's a giant, has a lefty shot, and the Rangers took him in the 6th round of this year's draft at number 178 overall. This pick originally belonged to the Winnipeg Jets. However, this was part of the Andrew Copp trade. The Rangers acquired Andrew Copp along with this pick. From the Winnipeg Jets, they send Morgan Barron to Winnipeg, along with 2 conditional second-round picks in 2022 and a 5th-round pick in 2023. They get Andrew Copp. They also get this draft pick, and they go with Roobroeck. Roobroeck has been playing in the OHL for the past 2 years. 2 years ago, he was on the Niagara Ice Dogs. Great team name, by the way, the Niagara Ice Dogs. 64 games, 8 goals, 13 assists, 21 points, and a -23. This past year, he was with the Generals. 68 games, 15 goals, 38 assists, 53 points, +1. Did not have any points in 5 playoff games and was a -6 in the postseason. Very solid numbers. When you consider that this is somebody that the Rangers were able to get in the 6th round, you can also go back to the not just Ranger philosophy, but I think it's a philosophy around the NHL. You can never have enough centers. Centers are always in high demand. And, maybe somewhere down the line, Roobroeck becomes a option for the New York Rangers. We will see. I get the feeling that given where he was drafted and given the fact that he's 18 years old, we're looking at a situation where he's not going to be ready for the NHL anytime soon. We'll see how the whole thing shakes out, but somebody to keep an eye on, I think. Interesting combination of size and skill, especially for somebody that you get as late as the 6th round here, as was the case with Roobroeck for the New York Rangers. Again, when you can find somebody this late in the draft with size and skill, I think you got to pounce. I was able to, I was going through YouTube looking for scouting reports, the whole 9 yards. It does get more difficult when you get into these later drafts. There's not as much information readily available on these late round picks, but the Generals did post a highlight video of him. He's gotten into a couple of fights and has won more than he's lost, or at least his highlight package, he won all the fights that he was in. There was one where he actually had the guy down on the ice and didn't throw any extra punches or anything, but the guy got back up and he kind of shoved him a little bit. So maybe he's somebody that plays with some edge to his game as well. The size does stand out. You see him on the ice in the OHL, and obviously there's some very young players and some players that are still developing that aren't even full size yet, but he just kind of towers over everybody. And it's crazy. He scores the goals that he scores on this highlight package. Almost all of them, seriously, like almost all of them were from the slot area. And it's funny, he just goes to the slot and faces almost no opposition. Because again, I think he just has so much of a size and strength advantage over so many of his opponents that there's just not a whole lot they can do. Either that or they just don't pick him up when he's going there. I mean, I think you got to at least try to defend him. But I couldn't tell you on this highlight, video, how many goals he scored where he just went to the slot, didn't have the puck, he just went to the slot, was just kind of hanging out there waiting for the pass, got the pass, and scored typically on a wrist shot. So yeah, I mean, he's somebody that, again, for as late as the Rangers got him, I think it's a solid pick overall, just from the limited information that I can find on him. And, obviously the highlight video, and I'm not a scout, but the fact that he was scoring on so many of his goals from the slot, that certainly stood out for me. The only scouting report I was able to find, a little bit of an older one, it's from the Elite Prospects 2022 NHL Draft Guide. That's what they had to say about Roobroeck. With the puck, Roobroeck starts give and goes, uses the middle and even delays to outwit pressure. He shows playmaking skills, regularly slipping pucks under defender sticks to teammates on the other side. He's confident on the backhand and has the handling skill to deke around defenders. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, when you have size and skill of this magnitude this late in the draft, I mean, I've seen something where, skating might be an issue for him, but you know what? You're in the 6th round, you're not going to find a perfect player. You're not going to find somebody that doesn't have some flaws or doesn't have some things that he needs to work on. So again, I think it's a fine pick given where the Rangers ended up selecting him. To kind of wrap up today's episode, just a couple of quick notes here. Tony DeAngelo, former Ranger, placed on unconditional waivers by the Flyers for the purposes of a buyout, and he now becomes the only player in NHL history, at least according to a couple different sources, to be bought out of his contract twice. He lost $3.533 million when the Rangers bought him out. He now loses $1.667 million from the Flyer buyout. So kind of a dubious record to hold for Tony DeAngelo. And the only other thing I want to mention here, Derek Stepan stories. Like I said, we're going to be doing an episode where I just read stories that you guys send me, who you're with, what you were doing, how you celebrated when Derek Stepan scored in overtime of Game 7 against the Washington Capitals to eliminate them. I know a lot of us will never forget where we were, and I'd love to hear some of your stories and share them on a future episode of Locked On New York Rangers. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.